Major Ernie Edwards, who was the commander of the 1608th Security Police Squadron, the security, Air Force security police that guarded Monsanto, came to me and said, I got a phone call from a guy by the name of Paul Bennewitz. He lives right outside the base. He lives in Four Hills, which is a housing community just on the other side of the base perimeter. And he told me he's seen all sorts of strange lights around Monsanto. So I said, oh, that's strange. And so I started checking into it, and we found out that Paul Bennewitz owned a business right outside the main gate of Kirtland, Thunder Scientific Laboratories. They made humidity sensors for submarines. So he had a government contract, and he had security clearance. So I went and paid him a visit, asked him about what he saw, and he started telling me all sorts of stories about what he saw and what he did and what he thinks they are. So we conducted an investigation just to make sure this guy wasn't a Russian spy. He wasn't, doing all these things. His house was literally just a few feet from the base perimeter. I mean, his backyard bucked right up to the base perimeter, and he had all this sophisticated. Now he was a physicist. He had all this sophisticated equipment on his patio, his upper bedroom patio, that was pointed towards the base, and that's what we were concerned about. So we conducted an investigation on him, not only us, but National Security Agency, because he actually tapped in, and this was classified at one time. I don't believe it is classified anymore. He was tapped in to a National Security Agency, an NSA project that was going on base, and which he shouldn't have been able to figure it out, but he did. Very smart guy. So we had to figure out how we're going to get him away from what he was doing. And so we started slowly convincing him, or not really convincing him, but just giving him the idea that this might be just UFOs, extraterrestrials. And he ran with that. And I know I had a lot of criticism about that. I fed him all this disinformation and I made him go crazy, but Paul thought a lot of this up on his own. I didn't have to. It wasn't very difficult for me to convince him what he was seeing. He just told me it's UFOs. Years later, I became friends with him. Years later, after I got out, he still owned it. I tried to explain to him that what he saw wasn't, but he would never believe me. He eventually went crazy and he died some years later. But some of what he was seeing was he took pictures of strange-looking lights in orbs. And in fact, I sat, and not just me, Jerry Miller, who was he had been a Project Blue Book investigator some years before, and he was in the intelligence staff at Kirtland, not with OSI, but with another agency. Him and I sat in a room, probably not any bigger than this, with really tall ceilings. And Paul was sitting, and we just had dinner, and we came in and we had some coffee, and the lights were down. In fact, none of the ceiling lights were on. We had just some table lights on. And we were talking. It was 8 or 9 o'clock at night in a winter night. And he says, he was explaining to us what he was seeing. And all of a sudden, we see this orb up in the corner of his room. And I looked at it and I watched it. Nobody else saw it at first. And I kind of elbowed. There was 3 of us there. It was me, Jerry, and another agent by the name of Steve Atzett. And I hit, and Jerry looked up and he said, and we didn't say anything to Paul. And it started flying around the room, and then, of course, Paul saw it. He said, well, there it is. We looked around like, what the heck is this thing, And so we watched it for maybe 20 seconds, and it disappeared. And went right back to that spot. Well, Jerry thought that it was created by Paul. And Jerry confronted him. He said, Paul, what did you just do? Paul said, no, I didn't do anything. He said, can I look and can I check things out? Yeah, go ahead. Well, Jerry's a scientist too. He looked all over, went up to his room, couldn't find anything that could have generated something like this. It was a ball of light with like little sparklers around it. And he says, that's the aliens. That's their reconnaissance. That's how they keep an eye on me. And a few weeks later, we were in his house without him being there. Now, a lot of people are saying we broke in, we surreptitious entry. He gave me the key. Paul gave me the key, told me to keep my eye on, if you ever want to go in there, here's the key. So we didn't get any search warrants or anything, but we went in there and we saw a real small orb, not the same size we saw earlier, real small orb that burned a hole through his ceiling. Through his wall, from one room to another. And when we came back a couple of weeks later, we told him about it, and that burn hole was still there. Oh. So at first, we thought Paul was just hallucinating, But the more I looked into this, there was something to this. He was actually photographing extraterrestrials. Not so much of a creature or but of their reconnaissance or their small orbs that they used to conduct experiments on humans.